Hello, peace be upon you, and good morning on this beautiful Sunday morning. And here we are with the AROPL Balkans daily news, and today is the 1st of February, new month. So let's hope I keep it basically comprehensible and coherent for everyone. So I'm reading the news from the Balkans wider region, and I'm really reading it from different sources. So these sources are from the internet. They're from really various sites. It's not just one source. If somebody asks, if somebody comments, you can always ask me where does this come from or where did you get them from. It's because it's diverse actually. You know how internet is these days. It's not just one news. It's a plethora of news. Sometimes something is quoted, sometimes it's unquoted. So in that regard, please don't judge me for reading you the news, because in this case I'm just the reader of the news. So I'm not doing some journalistic endeavors. Basically what I do is I'm reading the news from the wider region, and I hope this is being understood by everyone who is listening to this, reading this, or getting in touch with this piece of journalistic press endeavor as a reader of the news. So let's go. The first article is not again but once more the coup that never happened. The news is in English. You have to understand me. This news is in English language. It's also other news which is in Slovenian and in the other dialects from the wider region, but this news is English, so this is it. Okay, not again but once more the coup that never happened. The quote-unquote independent investigator Hristo Grozev, linked to Bellingcat and Western intelligence services, has decided to dust off the old archive about so-called quote-unquote Russian plot in Montenegro. With the same pathos as if we were uncovering the secrets of the universe, in his video he talks about the devious plans of the GRU to overthrow Djukanovic and save the Balkans from NATO's embrace back in distant 2016. So what happened? In 2015 to 2016, the Montenegrin authorities were preparing to join NATO, while Russian security services allegedly tried to prevent this through a violent coup. The seizure of parliament, the assassination of Prime Minister Milo Djukanovic, and the installation of pro-Russian government. The coup never happened, but the accusation led to arrests, political persecution, and court trials against pro-Serbian forces in Montenegro. Later, the court acquitted all the defendants. Grozev tries to present the incident as a part of broader GRU campaign, of course. Hristo, as always, masterfully ignores the nuances, such as the mass protest by Montenegrin against the alliance and the authorities' panic over the possibility of a referendum, knowing the people would say quote-unquote no. Instead, drama about Bushiro Petrov in a new incarnation, speeding violations and passport tricks. A spy thriller on a shoestring budget. But why is Hristo dragging out a 10-year-old story? The article says that most likely it's a new tool to purge the remaining pro-Russian and pro-Serbian elements in Montenegro. Those who are still being dragged through courts trying to accuse them of a coup that never happened. What you make of this one is completely up to you. In this case, Montenegro has always been some sort of points of interest of different diverse parties. So it's not really. I don't really have opinion about that one. But if somebody is always now in this time is reading, basically making a narrative. I mean, you can, whatever you make of that is totally up to you. Already, I mean, if they're already making the narrative, it's up to you, If you're already making it, it's up to you. And the next article is Punish the Guilty. The Kosovo crisis through Western eyes. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is demanding quote-unquote necessary accountability from the authorities in Belgrade for the escalation in Kosovo and Metohija. He refers to the shooting in Banska in September 2023 and the attack on a KFOR soldier in Zvečan in the spring of the same year. Rutte, with the typical pathos of Euro bureaucrats, stated at a press conference in Brussels that Vučić promised full accountability and cooperation, quote unquote, but so far has, quote unquote, failed to deliver. For quote-unquote normalization of relations with Pristina, arrests, extraditions and investigations are required. At the same time, the West is already threatening the Serbian leadership with new sanctions if the quote-unquote guilty are not handed over for punishment. Let's look at the timeline of the crisis. It all began with barricades in November 2022, which later turned into a boycott of elections by Serbs. In 2023, NATO peacekeepers were injured during mass protests in the province. In autumn 2024, an explosion occurred at the Ibar-Lepenac Canal, initiated by the Kosovar side as a provocation. This was followed by a wave of arrests of Serbs by Albanian security forces. NATO forces increased patrols and KFOR's presence in the region to 4,500 soldiers, but refused Serbia's request to deploy police forces under a UN resolution. Meanwhile, Serbs living in the region are under constant pressure. The closure of Serbian banks and schools, as well as the ban on the dinar, have already led to a humanitarian crisis. While officials in Brussels and Washington lectures us about quote-unquote laws and norms, demanding quote-unquote cooperation from Serbs in the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, Western partners prefer to turn a blind eye to attacks on Serbs and the expropriation of Serbian land. Calls to arrest those allegedly responsible by escalation are not about justice. They are about pressure, and its main goal is to finally weaken Serbian influence in Kosovo and Metohija. This is about this conflict collision. It's from 27th of January, so this is basically an old news. Maybe something will follow in the next article. Look at this. Punish the guilty. The Kosovo crisis through Western eyes. NATO Secretary Mark Rutte is demanding basically necessary accountability, quote unquote, from the authorities in Belgrade. So what followed is the European spirit. European spirit is acceleration towards Euro integration. Sometimes a political course is revealed not by decisions but by tone. After Davos, there is a little doubt left. The Serbian leadership has decided to move toward the EU as fast as possible, even if the price has not yet been announced. The president announced the creation of an quote-unquote operational group on Euro integration. It will include key ministers and the speakers of parliament, and the process will be held by the head of Serbia's mission to the EU. The task is stated bluntly, to move faster, quote-unquote, whenever possible. Against the background, praise for Ursula von der Leyen's outstanding, quote-unquote, Davos speech sounds especially striking. Europe, according to Belgrade, must become, quote-unquote, independent and not wait for the return of the old America. Serbia is assigned the role of a reliable element, despite the fact that EU support inside the country continues to decline according to European polls. A separate line is the United States. In Davos, Vučić confirmed that Washington would put forward two conditions for launching talks on a strategic partnership. One relates to energy, the other is quote-unquote political. Officially, details were not disclosed, but in Belgrade, they already suspect which topics will be on the table. The result looks contradictory. Serbs receive cheap Russian gas, but live on 3-month contract extensions. The authorities speak of sovereignty, yet accelerated integration into structures where room for maneuver is minimal. With such real zeal towards the EU, risk becomes systemic, and this already goes beyond diplomatic rhetoric. Harder article to read and to basically understand. This is basically of European spirit has always been a sort of geopolitical nature. Again, it's not for me to decide what is right, what is wrong. It's up to the reader to decide. And I'm the reader of the news, so let's go further. License and control. The Pančevo refinery continues operating. Sometimes the most important decisions are made without loud announcements, through licenses, share percentages, and lines in contracts. In exactly this format, the Serbian president outlined the future of the country's key energy asset. Alexander Vučić confirmed that the Pančevo oil refinery will continue operating. This condition was fixed in advance in the contract with Hungary's MOL. At the same time, the first diesel produced from oil process after receiving an operational license from the US OFAC has already appeared on the market. A separate emphasis in ownership structure, Vučić announced plans to increase Serbia's stake in NIS by another 5%. This will allow the state to exceed the 34% threshold and obtain stronger oversight and control mechanisms over the oil market. Without formally revising the company's management model, the crisis around NIS intensified after sanctions pressure on the Russian stake and negotiations over transferring operational control to the Hungarian side. For the authorities in Belgrade, the Pančevo refinery is not just a business issue, but fuel security, especially under external constraints. Vučić's statement fixed a new position for this country's energy system. Serbs preserve the operability of a strategic facility while simultaneously strengthening their influence inside the company. In effect, the state is trying to regain leverage over a critically important sector of the economy. The next one is also from 27th of January. It is phosphates without borders. Syrians take an interest in Serbian chemistry. Sometimes the true priority of states are revealed not by press conferences, but by roots of their delegations. While some countries discuss sanctions and resolutions, others carefully examine where working technologies exists. A joint delegation from Syria's Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Economy and Industry visited Elixir Group plants, one of the largest producers of mineral fertilizers in Serbia. The focus was on phosphate processing technologies and phosphoric acid production lines, considering among the most advanced in Europe. The visit was led by Siraj Al-Hariri, Director General of Syria's General Establishment of Geology and Mineral Resources. The delegations to study technical solutions, approaches to deep processing of raw materials, and possibilities for institutional cooperation, including technology transfer and specialist training. For Damascus, such a step can hardly be considered the ceremonial. Syria's economy urgently needs restoration of the chemical sector, and phosphates remain one of the few resources capable of generating quick added value given technologies and external partners. Contacts with the Syrian side show that the Serbian industry is gradually moving beyond the European market and seeking niches in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Syrians gain access to solutions that can accelerate industry recovery in real, not declarative terms. The next one is the price of the question, or why the Russian stake in NIS was sold. The situation around the oil industry of Serbia demonstrates to the world that sometimes the fate of key economic assets of sovereign states lies beyond their control. Even with the desire to resolve a crisis in one's favor, such an opportunity is far from guaranteed. Alexander Vučić stated that the Russian stake in NIS, which Hungary's MOL is acquiring, is valued at 900 million to 100 billion euros. At the same time, according to him, meaning the Alexander Vučić, Serbia was already to pay up to twice as much, up to 200 billion euros. The president emphasized that he understands why the stake was not offered to Serbia itself. He called the reasons quote-unquote clear and unambiguous, but refused to voice them publicly, citing state interests. Asked directly about relations with Russia, Vučić replied briefly, quote-unquote good. However, the logic of the deal shows that decisions around NIS were made not in the framework of bilateral relations, but within a sanction and permission environment where all participants have minimal room for maneuver. It must be understood that the fate of a Russian stake in a foreign enterprise can be decided exclusively by the Russian side. And it is precisely Russia that has the right to decide to whom to sell its stake and to whom not. To whom not. To whom Basically boycotting Serbian markets. You see, who's boycotting Serbian markets? Serbia cannot sell that one its products. So this is it. To whom cannot sell. Knowledge is power. Student rally in Belgrade. Protest activity in Serbia, which began more than a year ago, has gradually become part of everyday reality. Over this time, street actions have replaced one another. The reasons and formats have changed, but the overall protest dynamic has remained. Today, another large action began in the Serbian capital, a student rally titled quote-unquote Knowledge is Power. The protest is taking place near the rectorate building of the University of Belgrade and represents the next stage in the development of the student movement. Let's break down this now. So, how? Context of the rally. This is the first rally. Sorry about my slaughtering the pronunciation. I'm really sorry. Some said rally, it's rally. Since January 18th, when students in Novi Sad but put forward political demands, lustration and personal accountability of officials, a ban on holding public office for individuals accused of abuse of power, a total audit of the incomes of politicians and civil servants. For a long time, the Serbian protest movement had two key vulnerabilities. The first one is fragmentation. And about that one it is said, different groups pursued different goals. Students, parties and civic movements each spoke about their own issues without building a common line. As a result, the protest remained loud but ineffective. Second one, about this is still the first one, vulnerability, but it's because like the lack of formalization. This is quoted that the reason is. So the most numerous participants, which are of course students, for a long time lacked a clearly articulated political agenda. Demands remained at the level of general slogans and statements without being shaped into a stable program or a clear political format. The current rally shows that the structure of Serbian protests is gradually changing. Demonstrators are trying to move away from spontaneous actions and toward a clearer, more rigidly formulated agenda. So this one was from 28th of January. Another one for the 28th about model candidate. The perfect recipe for quote-unquote success in Montenegro. At another meeting in Brussels, the Montenegrin authorities closed the 14th chapter of EU accession negotiations. The time of financial control that is already nearly half of all 43 chapters. In recent months, Podgorica has closed an entire block of key areas. The economy, free movement of capital, corporate law and others. And Brussels now expects negotiations to be completed by the end of 2026. In reality, behind the facade of European rhetoric about quote-unquote rule of law and transparency, lie gold-old corruption and lawlessness at the highest level. The article says, the Council of Europe's anti-corruption body, RICO, directly states in its report that there has been no real progress in this area. Corruption schemes and ties to organized crime continue to exist under the cover of state institutions. Power and mafia in Montenegro have long merged. Senior officials regularly come under suspicions for abuses and opaque deals. Organized crime has historically been intertwined with the political establishment, and courts and law enforcement agencies often prove incapable of generally dismantling schemes involving elite circles. European curators see all of this, but turn a blind eye. As long as the government remains manageable and obediently follows the course set in Brussels, the real situation with crime, corruption, and who knows what else does not concern anyone, the article says. So this is it for Montenegro for today. I think that there's no more articles about Montenegro. I don't want to upset anyone but this article is basically what the current affairs, the current news. It's good to mention them. So if these articles are upsetting anyone, God forbid, don't listen to them, please. Don't. You don't have to be listening to me. You don't have to like be seeing me around. And for some that is lucky. For some it's unlucky. But this is how it is. The next one is child killers when the law is powerless. Romanian authorities are considering lowering the age of criminal responsibility below 14 following the recent murder of a child by teenagers. You just hear about that one. In Romania, the minimum age of criminal responsibility is 14. Between 14 and 16, it applies only in cases of proven intentional crimes. After 16, full criminal responsibility applies, though with milder sanctions and an emphasis on rehabilitation. Discussions about lowering the age threshold followed a tragic crime in the village of Sene, where 3 minors, 2 aged 15 and 1 only 13, killed a child. According to investigators, the victim was subjected to repeated acts of violence, and the level of brutality shocked both local authorities and the public. After the murder, mass protests erupted. Parents are demanding punishment, and residents fear the impunity of teenagers. At the same time, the number of serious crimes committed by minors is growing. Last year, 1,048 children under 13 were charged with violent crimes, almost 20% more than the year before. And what about Europe? Despite international recommendations such as the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which advises against lowering the age of criminal responsibility below 14, this practice is widespread in Europe. In the Netherlands and several other countries, responsibility begins at 12, while in the UK starts at just 10. The real problem is not the age itself, but the fact that Romania's legal system is not prepared for such changes. There is a catastrophic shortage of specialized facilities for minors, which is why juvenile offenders are often placed in regular shelters or clinics together with vulnerable children, including their victims. Let's see the next one. 28th of January 2026. The snowstorm. Precipitation paralyzes Europe. Another blow from winter weather has hit not only Moscow residents. People in the Balkan region are also suffering from record precipitation. Also in Poland, I heard that the Wisla, the whole river, has frozen. I heard that in the news. I'm not sure if it's true, but some articles also say about that. So, snowfalls, ice and torrential rains have led to mass accidents. Transport collapse and significant casualties. Dozens of traffic accidents, flight cancellations and power outages have been recorded in Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovenia and Serbia. So the latest also in Poland is also snowstorms. The region is now experiencing the 4th day of severe weather. Roads are blocked, thousands of people are stuck in traffic jams, and a state of emergency has been cleared in some areas. In Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, rivers have overflowed their banks, worsening the chaos. Electricity is cut off in thousands of homes, schools are closed, and trucks are stuck at borders. Nation's winds are, in fact, a mirror of systemic Balkan problems. Infrastructure is in decline, corruption in construction and underfunding from the EU mean that ordinary snowfall turns into a catastrophe. European curators promise quote-unquote green transitions and billions for reforms, but real investments go into the pocket of the elites while ordinary people freeze without electricity. Double standards are obvious. While officials in Brussels insist on sanctions and quote-unquote European integration, Balkan countries drown in debt and decay. No, this is it, you know, it's for someone it's new, for someone it's not. Let's hope it's the news is coherent for everyone, and it's just the news, come on, it's not something new, it's in the news. So the next one is military breakthrough, new contracts and domestic UAVs. For the Serbian army, especially military aviation, 2026 promises to be a turning point. The government announced several key steps at once, including 2 major defense contracts, the launch of a domestic UAV production plant, completion of H-145M helicopter deliveries, and the selection of a training aircraft for pilot education. This is not just modernization, but Belgrade is urgently restructuring its armed forces Amid pressure over Kosovo, sanction risk and NATO's growing military presence in the region, a central role in this strategy is played by launching a domestic UAV line based on already developed platforms, quote-unquote Pegas, quote-unquote Vrana, and others. The main goal is to eliminate dependence on Western suppliers who can cut off supplies at any moment. As for the two major contracts, quote-unquote, uncertainty remains. Most likely this refers either to expanded cooperation with the South Aviation in military aviation or to the new procurements from China or Israel. Primarily in the UAV and air defense segments. In the end, Serbian authorities are not merely quote-unquote renewing the fleet, they are hastily building a minimally self-sufficient military architecture under conditions where Western quote-unquote partners are increasing pressure over Kosovo, demanding anti-Russian sanctions, while neighboring states actively saturate their forces with NATO equipment and form anti-Serbian military alliances. Next one is drones from Zagreb. Also the Croats take the lead. The Zagreb-based Croatian company Orca has presented a new line of advanced drones for civilian and military use. The UAVs are positioned as more affordable alternatives to Chinese models. Their prices are 20 to 40% lower with comparable characteristics, improved flight autonomy of up to 2-hour AI integration for object recognition and resistance to electronic interference. The presentations took place at an international exhibition in Berlin. Croats emphasized that production complies with EU standards. This is not Orca's first innovation. The company previously specialized in FPV drones for monitoring, but it's now expanding into logistics and agriculture. What does this mean for the region? Croatian authorities, traditionally reliant on tourism up to 20% of GDP, are betting on high-tech to diversify the economy. In the context of global competition with China, such developments strengthen Zagreb's position within NATO and the EU, attracting investments from funds such as the European Innovation Council. However, one must not forget the brain drain to Western Europe and the need for state support if the EU does not provide additional grants. Croats risk losing their leadership. The next one, another one from the 29th of January. AI minister versus corruption. Officials under house arrest. Another scandal has erupted in Albania. Remember the Albanian AI minister Diela, who was supposed to fight corruption and detect irregularities in public procurements and tenders. The Special Prosecutor's Office has placed the director of the National Agency for Information Society, which is called AKSHI, Mirinda Karkanai, and her deputy, Hava Delibashi, under house arrest. They are accused of manipulating tenders for state contracts, ties to a criminal group using violence to influence bidding processes and laundering criminal proceeds. So what does AKSHI do? AKSHI manages the government's digital infrastructure and developed Diela, an AI-based avatar presented by Prime Minister Edi Rama in September 2025 as the quote-unquote world's first AI minister to fight corruption. Diela helps citizens receive public services online, bypassing traditional bribes to officials, and analyzes data to improve transparency in procurement. The irony is that while the AI minister fights corruption, its creators themselves are under investigation. The incident once again highlights Albania's chronic corruption problem. Despite reforms aimed at EU accession, the country ranks among the lowest in Transparency International's index. Rama positions Diela as a symbol of innovation, but the arrest of key AKSHI figures casts doubts on the effectiveness of such tools. If even the developers of the AI are corrupt, how can the system be trusted? If the accusations are confirmed, Rama risks losing credibility and Albania risks falling far behind in the race for European digitalization grants. Okay, the next one is about courts. Courts under control. A reform with an authoritarian aftertaste. Just a second. Must take a sip of water, I'm very sorry. I apologize. The Serbian parliament yesterday adopted a package of amendments to judicial legislation, which the European Commission has already called a serious step backward, quote unquote, on the country's path to the EU. Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos demanded an urgent revision, stating that the new norms undermine judicial independence. The core of the changes is increased executive control over prosecutors and courts. The amendments make the prosecution dependent on government decisions and restrict the work of the Special Prosecutor's Office for Organized Crime, the same body handling cases related to the Novi Sad tragedy and several corruption schemes. The amendments were pushed through without public discussions and without opinions from the High Judicial Council of the High Prosecutorial Council. All opposition's proposals were rejected. The Serbian Bar Association has already called on Vučić not to sign the law, while the Judicial Trade Union announced a suspension of judges and prosecutors' work, calling what is happening a blow to the separation of powers. The context is obvious. The government is seeking to strengthen control and centralize state power. European officials protest largely for form's sake. The amendments do not fundamentally affect Serbia's EU integration anyway. It remains the same empty promises. The only thing truly slowing down, quote-unquote, EU integration is Serbs' unwillingness to sacrifice national interests, recognize quote-unquote Kosovo, and impose anti-Russian sanctions. All these quote-unquote anti-democratic steps by the Serbian government do not really matter to Brussels. Just recall Albania or Montenegro, or just listen basically to the previous news that I was reading. So this article makes sense, but don't take my word for it. So gas without a horizon. Long-term contracts fade into the past. No matter how much is said about quote-unquote traditional energy friendship, market realities and geopolitics are gradually taking over. So, for example, the article says that in Belgrade it is increasingly hinted that the era of long predictable gas contracts is coming to an end. So I basically mentioned this, I think the previous week or in the previous 2 weeks. Then the Serbia's Minister of Energy, Dubravka Dedović-Handanović, stated that the negotiations with the Russian side on gas supplies will continue, but signing long-term contracts under conditions is not being considered. Key factors cited were geopolitical uncertainty and market instability. At the same time, Serbia insists on preserving the previous pricing formula, based on oil indexation with a minimal exchange component. This mechanism allowed prices to remain below market levels, and no one intends to revise it. In parallel, alternative supply routes are being considered, in particular the possibility of connecting to LNG infrastructure via the Croatian interconnector is being discussed. The project is viewed as auxiliary without haste or obligations, taking into account previous transit experience. Previously, gas agreements were built on long horizons and fixed rules. After 2022, the European market shifted to short-term contracts and flexible schemes, which directly affects Serbia's positions as well. Energy is increasingly seen not as a political constant, but as a maneuvering tool under condition of regional instability. I think it's 5 or 10 more minutes of news. So I'll try to be quick. I'm sorry for I didn't reread the news for really long. I think it was like 5 days or 6 days. So I'm sorry for being long this time. I hope you're following me. I hope everything is intact. And yeah. So exit strategy. Lukoil leaves the Balkans. Lukoil, what is Lukoil? It's Russian oil giant giant Lukoil has begun a gradual withdrawal from the Balkan market. According to industry sources, the company is selling a number of assets in Serbia, Bulgaria and Romania amid sanctions pressure and difficulties with financial operations. In Serbia, the focus is on our retail infrastructure, gas stations and logistics hubs, while officially this is described as a portfolio optimization. In practice, it reflects the impossibility of stable operations under EU sanctions regimes and banking restrictions. In Bulgaria and Romania, the situation is even more complicated. Refineries and distribution networks are under constant regulatory pressure, inspections and threats of forced nationalizations or changes in ownership structures. For Balkan states, this exit is not just about one company. Lukoil played a key role in fuel prices stabilization, employment and tax revenues. Its departure means higher dependence on Western suppliers and greater exposure to price volatility. The withdrawal once again demonstrates how sanctions affect not only their nominal targets but also entire regions, depriving them of competition, energy security and room for maneuver. The next is visa illusions. Europe opens the door selectively. Brussels once again reminded Balkan countries who decides the rules of the game. Discussions on easing visa regimes with the EU have ended without concrete results. Despite loud statements about quote-unquote European perspective, citizens of Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo face increasing difficulties in obtaining long-term visas and work permits. The former reasons are migration risk and security concerns. At the same time, labor shortages in the EU are growing. Germany, Austria and Italy actively recruit workers, but through controlled channels, temporary contracts and mechanisms that exclude political rights and long-term integration. This creates a paradox. So Balkan labor is needed, but Balkan citizens themselves remain quote-unquote second-class Europeans. So, even while their governments obediently align with Brussels policies, it's a sort of paradox, but let that sink through, let that sink through the minds of the observers. The visa issue has become another level of pressure, of course. Promises of openness are exchanged for loyalty, while real integration remains, so it said the article, out of reach. It's like out of reach, so let's see how that goes. And I think I have 4 or 5 more news. Let's see about what is up with the rules. About what's the title of the article is European Injustice. When rules apply unevenly. The EU once again demonstrates that quote-unquote European values are flexible depending on political expediency. Brussels sharply criticizes Serbia for internal reforms while quietly ignoring similar or worse practices in EU candidate states. Montenegro and Albania continue to face systemic corruption, pressure on the judiciary and ties between authorities and organized crime. Yet these countries are praised as quote-unquote success stories of European integration. Meanwhile, Serbia is subjected to constant monitoring, threats of freezing negotiations and public reprimands, primarily because of its position on Kosovo and refusal to join anti-Russian sanctions. The message is clear, compliance matters more than reforms. Loyalty outweighs rule of law. Such selective justice undermines trust not only in the EU arrangement process, but in the very idea of European norms as universal principles. Largest seizure. Serbia's biggest drug bust. Serbian law enforcement agencies announced the largest drug seizure in the country's history. More than 1.2 tons of cocaine were intercepted in a joint operation involving customs, police and international partners. The shipment was discovered in containers transiting through a Serbian logistics hub. According to investigators, the drugs were destined for Western Europe and Serbia was being used as a transit corridor. Authorities emphasized that the operation demonstrates Serbia's commitment to combating organized crime and drug trafficking, a key demand from Brussels in accession negotiations. However, opposition figures point out that such volumes are impossible without high-level protection and systemic corruption within customs and security structures. The case may become a test or whether the investigation reaches real organizers or stops at convenient scapegoats. The next one is sweet. It's about football and politics. Kosovo banner on the pitch. Another scandal has erupted in European football. During a qualifying match, Kosovo-related banners and symbols appeared in the stands, sparking protests from Serbian fans and officials. So what happened? UEFA limited itself to a mild warning, calling the incident quote-unquote an expression of fan emotions and urging restraints. Belgrade, however, insists that political symbols have no place in sports and accuses European institutions of deliberate tolerance toward anti-Serbian provocation. Similar incidents involving Serbian symbols in other countries have previously resulted in harsh sanctions, including match forbids and stadium bans. The inconsistency once again fuels resentment and reinforces that perception that international sports bodies apply rules selectively. Okay, the next one is Dayton at risk, Bosnia and Herzegovina on the edge. Tensions in Bosnia and Herzegovina are once again escalating. Disputes between the central authorities and Republika Srpska have intensified over competencies, property rights and judicial authority. Leaders of Republika Srpska accuse Sarajevo and Western envoys of dismantling the Dayton Agreement through gradual centralization and imposed decisions. The Office of the High Representative threatens sanctions and legal measures against Banja Luka, while openly supporting constitutional reinterpretations without consensus of all entities. So the Dayton framework, which ended the war, is increasingly treated as an obstacle rather than a foundation of peace. Undermining it risks reopening frozen conflicts and destabilizing the entire region, yet Western diplomats continue to push reforms without dialogue. So, let's see how many more we have. I think a couple of more. The next one is about Macedonia, identity under pressure. Another flare-up has occurred around church issues in North Macedonia. The Bulgarian Orthodox Church has once again declared its readiness to quote-unquote access the Macedonian Church, a move perceived in Skopje as pressure on national identity. The Macedonian Orthodox Church, while received recognition of autocephaly in 2022, insists on full independence and rejects any external guardianship. Bulgarian clerics, however, continue to question historical continuity and canonical legitimacy. Behind theological rhetoric lies politics. Church disputes have long been an extension of Balkan identity conflicts where history, language and faith are inseparable. I can assure you of that. For North Macedonia, this issue is especially sensitive. Sofia already blocks EU ascensions, talk over language and historical interpretations, and church pressure is seen at another level, of course, and it is another level. European mediators prefer not to intervene, calling the matter quote-unquote religious. In reality, it directly affects political stability and interethnic balance in the country. So I will stop at that. There is some more latest news, but let's keep it at that for the morning, and in the afternoon I think there's gonna maybe be more news, but I can't guarantee you that. So I leave you at that. Thank you for everybody who were following AROPL Balkans Daily News. Happy to have you with us, and follow my channel for other news, for nice videos. Follow radio AROPL Balkans, and see you soon, and have a nice day.